Hey Squad, welcome back to Crime Squad Podcast with your host, Natasha. I'm so happy you're here. If you're new here, this podcast features true crime coverage of cases in Canada. Some are new, some are old, some are solved, some are cold. If this sounds like your thing, I'd love it if you joined the squad and subscribe to Crime Squad Podcast wherever you listen. A comment or a rating goes a long way too. If you're part of the squad already, thanks from the bottom of my heart. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Let's get into it. Long-term unsolved cases, also referred to as cold cases, present a unique set of challenges to investigators. In any investigation, there are key pieces needed to have a good go at actually solving the crime. And that's obviously evidence. Whenever possible, credible witnesses as well. In a cold case, the odds are stacked against investigators. The longer time wears on, the more likely evidence is to be tainted or never found at all. At the best of times, witness testimony can be highly inaccurate to the true facts of a case, and the passage of time adds only to inaccuracy in memory. On the other hand, a fresh set of eyes reviewing evidence can do wonders for a cold investigation. A new perspective is never a bad thing. If the new person coming in has no previous experience with the case, they could unlock new evidence just by reviewing case files and digging a little deeper. What I wouldn't give to be part of a cold case squad and to review actual police files. I've always maintained that sometimes people are just naturally good at things. Like the person who is naturally good at gardening but doesn't have schooling for botany. Like the person who is great at analyzing data but doesn't have a university degree. And then there are people who go to school for the majority of their early lives and get the degrees, but they just don't have a knack for the subject they want to be in. Who's to say a regular Joe or Jolene shouldn't be able to review cold case files? Maybe, just maybe, a random person could connect dots that have been overlooked by a seasoned investigator. And not because the investigator is careless by any means, but because sometimes there are people who have a natural knack for putting the pieces together. This case is a tricky one that has me questioning the facts presented. And unfortunately, one of the key players in this story, who is writing a book about his investigation into this case, has passed away, taking all the knowledge with him. Let's review today's case, the case of the Lost Boys of Pickering. Pickering, Ontario, is a nautical village directly east of Toronto. Pre-colonialism, the location was inhabited by the Wendat peoples, who were the original caretakers of the land. Today, the population is just under 100,000 people. But if images of small-town farmers are what you see, you'd be incorrect. Pickering is actually a fairly ritzy little town, with most households clearing over $100,000 in annual income. It's mostly suburban, with the industrial sections grouped close together close to the Pickering nuclear generating station. When the nuclear generating station was in the process of being built in 1966, houses in the nearby area of Squires Beach were vacated, creating a ghost town of abandoned lots. And not one, but two ghost towns are present in Pickering's peripherals. There is also the hamlet of Altona. Labeled a ghost town more recently, homeowners were mostly bought out after the government decided to look into the feasibility of building an airport. What makes Pickering a nautical town is the fact that it sits along the shoreline of Lake Ontario, which is one of the Great Lakes. Lake Ontario is the 13th largest lake in the world. If you count the islands within its mass, Lake Ontario's shoreline is 712 miles long, which is equal to over 1,100 kilometers. Lake Ontario is also an outlet for the Atlantic Ocean by way of the St. Lawrence River through Quebec. Geography lesson aside, I think we're well acquainted enough now with Pickering to get right into the facts of today's case. Let's take it back to 1995 when Jean Chrétien was our prime minister, Alanis Morissette released the album Jagged Little Pill, and I was made a big sister when my brother was born. A party was just what the doctor ordered. After all, the group of teens were known to enjoy having fun and letting loose, and now that Chad had an apartment, they had a place to party without feeling like their parents were breathing down their necks. St. Paddy's Day was as good a reason as any to get drunk. And so, on March 16th, 1995, Jay Boyle, Danny Higgins, Jamie Lefebvre, Mikey Cummins, and Robbie Rumbold went to Chad and Val's place for a night of good times. I can tell you, as the first person in my group of friends to get my own apartment, my house became Party City. I was on the ground floor, so friends would just show up with a tap, tap, tap on the patio door. They'd come bearing gifts of booze or pot or mushrooms or all of the above. In fact, I actually received a notice from the landlord of the building that if I didn't tone down the smell of marijuana, I was going to be evicted. The partying died down as I got older, and now I can't even think of the last time I had a friend over, to be honest. My home is now my sanctuary, and parenting means I have so little time to unwind. Sadly, the 6 teens have not been able to experience the emotional growth that comes with age. Nobody knows what the conversation was that night, what was talked about, or what was decided. The only thing that is known for sure is that the 6 boys were together, and they told partygoers they were going to the beach. And then they were gone. What happened to them? On the morning of March 17th, Chad's girlfriend Val and Jay's girlfriend Monique were worried. The boys hadn't come home. Even though they had a reputation for being fun-loving and getting into trouble, both girls knew something was wrong. After all, Jay had a new baby girl to come home to, and Chad and Val had just secured their own apartment and were enjoying being together. The girls talked to friends who had been at the party, but they came up empty-handed. They started contacting friends and family members to ask if the boys were there, but nothing came of it. Thinking maybe they'd been picked up by cops for one reason or another, as was typical of teenage boys running around in the early hours of the morning drunk, they called the local jail to see if they'd been admitted. No dice. The next call the girls made was to police to report the boys missing. Reportedly, police felt it was Friday night, and based on the boys who were missing, they felt it was just a situation where they were blowing off steam and they would come home when they were ready. Meanwhile, Sharon Cummins, the mother of Mikey, was replaying the night before when Mikey had left to go to Chad's place. He was in good spirits, as always, and was grinning a huge grin as he said his goodbyes. Then he did something odd. He slid something from around his neck and placed it in his mother's palm without a word of explanation. Sharon opened her palm and saw it was a gold chain Mikey wore every day. On the chain were gold charms, an eagle, a pendant that said "Number 1 Son," and another that said "Love You." This small detail would be one to haunt her, as she'd always be left to wonder why. Why that item? Why that day? And why were there so many things unsaid? Across town at Frenchman's Bay Marina on Saturday, March 18th, police were taking a report regarding 3 missing boats. One, a 14-foot imitation Boston whaler. Another, a 14-foot rowboat, and the other, a 3-wheeled paddle boat. The 14-foot rowboat was later located, but the whaler and paddle boat remained a mystery. It appeared they had been stolen. Police began by reviewing the marina surveillance footage, and this is where the pieces began to click into place. To be honest, though, I'm not entirely convinced, and there are others who follow my train of thought, but let's get into these facts as they were presented by law enforcement at the time. Surveillance footage from the marina showed 3 of the 6 missing boys. The footage is grainy at best, but apparently the boys caught on film were Mikey, Jamie, and Robbie. The belief is that the boys stole the boats and went for a drunken joyride. It was at 2 or 3 a.m. It was March, and it was cold. Lake Ontario is an average of 2 degrees Celsius, and in March 1995, it was no different. Being of diminished capacity with no life coats on board of any of the boats, police believe there was some kind of accident or error in judgment that resulted in the boat or boats sinking, pulling the boys down into the depths of Lake Ontario along with any evidence of their late-night cruise. Oftentimes, the simplest explanation is the best one. Due to the temperatures, the boys likely would have first experienced shock at the frigid water. It was the middle of the night, and bodies of water in the dark can be like pits of darkness. Hypothermia would have set in extremely quickly, rendering the boys unable to swim or yell for help. 36 hours after they went missing, the search was on. Durham Regional Police officers combed the shoreline looking for any signs of the boys or the missing boats. Marine units were also in the water, and Coast Guard vessels were out in full force. To cover more area, the Canadian Air Force Base located in Trenton launched a sea rescue initiative and put a helicopter and a C-130 Hercules into the skies. For days, the search continued, but nothing was found. At one point, some of the smaller search vessels had come off the waters due to swells or waves that were coming in at over 6 feet high. Lake Ontario is not a placid lake. It's quite tumultuous, actually. And as mentioned in the beginning of this episode, it's very large in volume and depth. Family members held out hope that their boys, even if they had taken the boats, were safe. They hoped that maybe they had sought shelter from the cold after their joyride by breaking into a local cottage. It was 11 days later that a gas can washed up on the shores of Wilson, New York. Without understanding how this conclusion took place, police deemed it to be a gas can from the missing boat the boys had stolen. And let's talk about the missing boat for a moment, because this boat has been a big question mark. I think the biggest question on everyone's lips, especially if you don't know a lot about bodies of water, is where are the bodies? Where are the boats? According to Coast Guards, people who like to fish and do fish in bodies of water in Lake Ontario, as well as police, boats can sink in Lake Ontario quite easily and may never be found. Not even a trace. It's the same, apparently, with bodies. Here's a science lesson. When a person drowns, there are many factors at play that will determine how recovery of the body will occur. Temperature of the water, as well as currents, tides, debris, or other aquatic items within the body of water all play a part. It's complex to search bodies of water, and bodies do not always resurface. When a drowning death occurs, the lungs fill with water, and it can take as little as 10 seconds for a deceased person to sink. It's only when the decomposition process begins that a body will float back up to the surface. If, however, the body has become large in an unreachable underwater location, or if the water temperature does not rise to levels in which standard decomposition can begin, a body may never surface. The presence of marine life must also be considered, as well as microorganisms that aid in the decomposition process, leaving behind only bones and shreds of clothing. Just 3 days after the search began, it was over. An underwater search was never conducted due to the complexity it required. The thing I find most odd about this entire situation, though, is the fact that the 14-foot boat that they stole was actually marketed as being unsinkable. To this day, it's known as the unsinkable vessel. And I get it. The makers of the Titanic believed it too was unsinkable, and we all know how that worked out. However, I think when you mix together desperation and grief, as well as a lack of evidence, it's easy to craft stories with a different outcome. almost like a choose-your-own-adventure book, where you can sit and play out so many different scenarios and fantasize about what each choice will result in. It's a dangerous game to play when it's about a missing loved one because you so badly want to believe they're still alive. Having to think about their sons drowning in the icy waters of Lake Ontario would be the worst-case scenario. I would try to avoid this thinking at all costs if I were in this situation. It would be much easier to believe something else happened. Now, time began to tick by without any sign of the boys, but the families wanted to believe one day they'd show up with apologies and then begin making up for lost time. In 1998, there was a potential break in the case. A pair of red Levi's jeans, similar to what Jay was wearing the night of the party, were found in the Niagara River when a grate in the forebay of the hydroelectric generating station in New York was cleaned. 2 sets of remains were located. It took 5 years for DNA to be extracted and tested, and it ended up not being a match to Jay Boyle. It made sense in a way, because the current from Niagara River actually flows into Lake Ontario. It would have been impossible for Jay's body, if he drowned in Lake Ontario, to go against the current 14 kilometers away from where they went into the water. Private investigator Bruce Ricketts took an active interest in the case and worked on it for over 10 years, pro bono. Throughout the years, he claimed police were being evasive, and he was not able to get access to reports he felt could shed light into the true events that happened. It has never sat quite right with Bruce that only 3 boys were caught on the surveillance video from the marina. Sometime after 2020, Bruce received a copy of the surveillance video from the marina after seeking it out for years and hitting dead ends. After reviewing the 16-hour video in full, he found something that had never been publicly released prior, and that was that there were other individuals at the marina that night. The facts of the surveillance video that Bruce Ricketts, a private investigator, had determined were later released as a public appeal for further witnesses to come forward. Bruce believed he was onto something. Here's what he noted. 3 of the boys were caught on film entering the marina at around 1:50 a.m. Shortly after that, at around 2:09 a.m., 3 new people were shown walking across the lot. A male and 2 females. The male in the video moved ahead of what appeared to be 2 females and held out his arm as though he were pointing at something. He seemed to potentially be holding something in his hand, but the video was too grainy to make out clear faces or items. This information gives me the chills and is the sliver of doubt regarding the accidental drowning deaths of the boys. Who were these people? Why have they never come forward? Were they out joyriding and also drowned? And if so, why were they never reported missing? At 2:21 a.m., Bruce said the camera near the docks, the one that would have had the most crucial footage of the boys, was shut down. Was this intentional? Was it just a faulty camera? It's impossible now, 30 years later, to know. In addition to these strange occurrences, Bruce also felt there was something more to this case because around the same time, and less widely reported, there was a massive fire. I've been able to narrow it down, and I believe the fire Bruce is referencing is the one that happened March 22nd, 1995, at the Scarborough Canoe Club. This fire claimed 50 of the 75 boats that were stored there, and damages were estimated to be close to $500,000 when both the marina and building were taken into consideration. The fire was believed to have been arson, but no charges have ever been laid. If you wanted to get rid of evidence that included boats on a body of water due to foul play, you might start a fire. Just saying. Bruce planned to continue to investigate, even releasing a short run of a book he'd penned about his 10-year-plus investigation. Sadly, an obituary for Bruce Ricketts says he passed away on January 2nd, 2024. Whatever information he had tragically went with him. 30 years later, the hope is dwindling for the families of Jay Boyle, Chad Smith, Danny Higgins, Robbie Rumbold, Jamie Lefebvre, and Mikey Cummins. The mystery of the lost boys of Pickering remains. What do you believe happened? Daniel Higgins was born on January 6, 1978, and lived in Pickering, Ontario. He is the youngest of 3 boys, and his mother refers to him as her baby. Life in Pickering was great, and Danny made a lot of friends. But in 1992, the family picked up and moved to Ajax, a town about 8 kilometers away from Pickering. Danny was leaving behind an established friend group, and after the move, things obviously changed for everyone. But even though they weren't as close as they used to be when they lived in the same neighborhood, they still had that foundation of friendship. The type that's hard to be done with. Because of this, Danny would often hop on his bike and pedal his way from Ajax to Pickering to hang out with his boys. Danny was a typical teenage boy. He preferred to sleep in instead of getting up for school, and he relied on his mother to give him some spending money when he was bored. Photographs of Danny as a teen show a boy with a goofy personality, highlighted by his open-mouthed grin. His style is very aligned to the mid-90s, with blonde hair kept long on top and slicked back. Sometimes he'd wear a backwards baseball hat. He has blue eyes and a tattoo on his upper right arm that says Cujo. On March 16, 1995, he bicycled to his mother's place of work, asked for $20, and told her he was going to meet up with his buddies. She assumed, of course, he would be biking to Pickering for the night. What his mother didn't know, of course, and how could she, is that this would be the last time she'd ever see her son. He was only 17 years old. Jay Boyle was a Christmas Eve baby, born December 24th, 1977. He had a big family, including 4 sisters. He truly loved his family and would protect his friends and family at any cost. As he grew into his teens, he had a reputation for being a bit of a troublemaker. He'd served 2 years at a juvenile detention facility for assault before he turned 17, and had other charges levied against him for possession of dangerous weapons, but these were later dropped. He was known to be a bit of a tough guy, and his appearance certainly fit. He was towering at 6 foot 2 inches, and very few would knowingly challenge him. He liked baseball, and he had a knack for it too. He dreamed of being a professional baseball player. The most widely circulated photograph of Jay shows a young man who appears to look very serious. There is a longing in his eyes that speaks to me of dreaming big but feeling rooted, like the dream may be impossible. He has dark eyebrows and dark facial hair, and his eyes are dark pools. His nose is slightly upturned, and his lips don't have a play of a smile on them. Jay dropped out of school in just grade 10 and didn't seem to have any prospects coming his way. But that seemed to change when his longtime girlfriend, 16-year-old Monique, gave birth to their daughter, Kiara. Jay was so happy with his beautiful little family, and he wanted to go back to school. He was also looking for a job. Monique knew Jay was going out with his friends on March 16, 1995. But when she didn't hear from him, she could have had no idea at the time that she'd never speak to him again. Chad Smith was born in 1976. Not much is known about his life before, and remember, this is before the days of social media, so I have little to work with. What I do know is he was starting to find his own way in life. He had just obtained an apartment unit he shared with his girlfriend Val. The pair had been together 2 years, and they were inseparable. He was all about having fun and letting loose when he could because he knew he had to make his own way in the world, and he wanted to enjoy his younger years for as long as he could before things had to get more serious. Life seemed great for Chad in March of 1995. He'd moved in with Val just 3 weeks before St. Patrick's Day. In fact, the party everyone was attending that night was at their new place. Chad is described as being happy-go-lucky. Photographs of Chad reveal a baby-faced boy with a smattering of freckles across his nose and cheeks. He has almond eyes, full lips, and an unremarkable nose. His hair, though, that's the fabulous part. It's quite long on top and styled. The sides are much shorter. Chad is a very handsome guy. That part is easy to see. Tragically, his mother Marie has suffered tremendously. A single mother to her 2 boys, Chad and younger brother Scott, Marie could have never guessed she'd lose a son. Who could, really? I don't think we walk around assuming we'll lose our child in some horrific way. By June of 1995, when Chad and the boys had been missing for 3 long months, Marie had contemplated suicide and had been hospitalized 3 times for mental health challenges. Marie wanted answers and was searching for them everywhere she could. She'd even gone to a psychic who told her Chad would be found alive but suffering from head trauma in a nearby marsh. It was late one night that Marie attempted to search the marsh for Chad, and upon finding nothing there, certainly not her son, alive but needing medical treatment, she fell into a pit of despair. Robbie Rumble was born in 1978 and was just 16 years old at the time of his disappearance. Robbie was one of those guys who carries himself well. He was considered a good-looking guy and had no issue getting attention from girls. Not only was he handsome, he was also a bit of a jock, having a knack for soccer and hockey. Photographs of Robbie show a boy with a crafty smile that seems knowing but also a little shy. He has an oval face, kind eyes, and short cropped hair. His eyes actually have a little dance of mischief in them. Interestingly enough, even though on the outside Robbie seemed to have it all, his parents describe him as being more introverted than extroverted, preferring to be more of a loner. And not just that, but trouble always seemed to find its way into Robbie's life. His father recalls it didn't matter who he hung out with. Robbie seemed to be attracted to being on the wrong side of the law and tended to get in trouble. On the night of March 16th during the party, Robbie called his parents and asked his father if he could stay out late. He called around 10:30 p.m., which was already late, but his father reminded Robbie that nothing good comes of hanging out late at night. It was when Robbie tended to find himself slipping up and doing things he shouldn't be. He got the permission he needed, though, and assured his father he would stay out of trouble. He didn't come home that night, but it wasn't unheard of. The parents of all the boys knew they were friends and knew they'd often be in each other's company. Robbie's parents, like many of the others involved, simply assumed the boys had crashed together after a night of drinking and they'd be home later the next day, nursing hangovers. The next day, Robbie's mother prepared a roast chicken dinner, making Robbie a plate for when he got home. He'd need to eat, and she was sure he'd be hungry. The plate would sit untouched in the fridge until eventually someone threw it out, which somehow seemed so final. Jamie Lefebvre was born in 1977. His mother, Carol, had 2 daughters before him, but Jamie was her youngest, her baby, and her only son. She raised him on her own when he was the age of 11 months on, and this is when I presume his parents split up. Jamie was known to be a jokester who wanted to keep everyone in good spirits. He had a way with quick wit, which allowed him to gain a reputation for being the life of the party. He could also do some pretty good comical expressions. The photograph I've seen of Jamie shows a boy with a long face, made somehow longer by his long honey-colored hair. He has no facial hair and nicely shaped eyes under prominent eyebrows. Jamie had dropped out of school like the rest of his friends, but he was planning to go back and finish. I think the reality of it all had settled in, and he knew he needed at least a high school diploma if he wanted to do something with his life. One thing that's quite interesting to note about Jamie is that he was proficient with watercraft. He was an avid fisherman, and his father had even given him an aluminum boat. Jamie was well versed on water safety and knew he should never go out on any kind of water without a life jacket. Michael Cummins was born in 1977 and was 17 years old in 1995. He lived with his mother Sharon and 8-year-old sister Felicia. Michael, who went by Mikey with his friends, was a quiet kid with a sunny disposition. His little sister adored him and often tried to follow him around the neighborhood just to spend time with him. His mother had struggled to come to terms with his absence. Much like Marie Smith, Chad's mother, there came a time after Mikey's disappearance that Sharon contemplated ending it all. His disappearance was the beginning of a downward spiral into a nightmare that has no escape, not even 30 years later. She clings to hope that he'll come home one day and they can start making up for lost time. All right, squad, that's going to do it for this episode of Crime Squad Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I've got some really interesting things happening in terms of bonus content, so I do hope you'll stay tuned for more. If you liked what you heard and you don't already, be sure to subscribe and follow for more content so you don't miss any episode drops. Remember, stay safe and be kind to each other. Catch you soon.